This podcast is intended for mature audiences only.
Welcome back to the Cuckold Marriage Podcast. I'm Cuckoldress Lexie Meadows, and today we're talking about something that has transformed the way many couples experience control, anticipation, and desire: male chastity. Joining us is KD, founder of Kink 3D, whose custom devices have helped thousands of couples explore everything from playful teasing to long-term denial. We'll be talking about the lifestyle, the psychology, and of course some of the spicy ways that chastity can show up in a cuckold relationship. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping items, of course. We say it all the time, but we genuinely enjoy hearing from you guys. Whether you have a question or a comment, a story to share, or an idea for a future episode, we'd love to hear it. There's a couple of different ways to reach out to us. The easiest is to just click the send fan mail link that'll be in the show notes, or you can just email us directly at podcast@cuckoldresslexie.com. Second, make sure you're following us on Blue Sky Social at the Cuckold Marriage Pod. It's where we share our updates, our thoughts, and also connect with listeners through between episodes. Finally, one of my favorite things is when a listener reaches out on Fansly and takes the time to say hello. I enjoy getting to know the people who support what we do. It always makes me smile when I see a new message. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, and maybe if you'd like some extra spicy content from me and a chance to connect, feel free to find my Fansly through cuckoldresslexie.com. And that's enough for me. Let me bring in everyone's favorite subby, Chris.
Hey, Lexie, how's it going? We are excited to be here with KD today. KD, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Katie, it's just such an honor to have you because everybody knows that Kink 3D makes the best chastity cages on the market. I mean, these devices are immaculate. And before we even started recording, I was saying that Lexie has her cucks. When somebody forms a cuckold relationship with Lexie, she has them get a Kink 3D cage as well. And everybody's reporting back. One of her cucks actually was in San Francisco and got fitted in your office there. So that was pretty exciting, exciting there. But when we think about Kink 3D, what inspired you to found the organization to start designing custom chastity devices? Was there a personal aha moment, or was it a frustration with chastity cages you had seen in the past that made you decide to start this?
It was really all of the above. I consider myself kind of an all-around kinky guy. I'm one of those people with this sort of classic kink origin story that I was a kid watching Saturday morning cartoons, and I would see the princess get captured and put in the dungeon, and something kind of lit up in my brain, even though I was, I don't know, 8 years old or however old that was. And so I've always known that I was attracted to things like bondage and kink and different interesting kinds of toys and gear, and that's on kind of on a switchy level, on really on all sides of the spectrum. And when it came to chastity, I think it was probably sometime in the 2010s. I was just on the internet and came across that in the course of my browsing of the web, and something lit up in my brain with that. And I thought, oh, that seems interesting. That seems kind of hot. And I tried one or two of the market leaders at the time, and they really just did not work for me. Not just in the sense that they weren't comfortable, but they really seemed dangerous. Like, they had sharp edges, they had all these pinch points. I tried wearing them for even a really short period of time, like an hour or two, and I could already tell that I was getting little cuts, and it was just not a good situation. So I kind of gave up on it, but something stayed in the back of my mind that made me feel like, man, I'm really bummed that this is not something that I get to try in a more extensive way. And eventually, I discovered a website that was in Europe where they would custom make these products and send them to you. So I ordered one. I kind of waited. I was so excited. It took a few months and arrived, and I could immediately tell that it was just still not going to work for me. And something about that experience of having put in this custom order, waited all this time, been so optimistic about it, and then still having it not work, but also kind of like having a vision of how I could see how it could have been better. And that was what really clicked in my mind of like, okay, I just have to do this myself, because there's no one else out there doing what I want to do. So I guess it's up to me. I have to do it.
Well, I love that you did that because you created such an amazing product. And I'm sure that all
Thank
the
you.
people who have ever bought one are thinking the same thing.
Well, thank you very much. We definitely get a lot of good reviews, and it's fun to see how much we've really kind of influenced the market and changed the market in the almost 8 years now that I've been doing this.
Well, and I'm glad you had a focus on safety because that, to me, when I started Chastity, was one of my concerns is, am I going to hurt myself, especially if I sleep in it at night? Um, so you do have to be careful with what you choose out there. Don't just go for the cheap one that you think, it's really, you can hurt yourself if you get the wrong ones, guys.
Yeah. So, you've been doing this 8 years. How do you feel that the chastity device market has kind of evolved since you started? And what are the trends that you've seen maybe in materials, fit, design, anything among your customers?
The market has evolved a huge amount. So when I started, which was in 2018, you could really list every chastity device that existed or every brand that was making them that existed on just about two hands. It was pretty easy to go through every device on the market and have like a knowledge and an understanding of what those were. And at the time, the market leaders were ones that were made out of like a clear plastic material, like a transparent plastic, and they looked kind of like medical devices. Like those were the ones that were by far the most popular that were out there. And then there were also a few companies that were really like artisans making these beautiful metal cages, usually ones that you would have to custom order, one at a time. They would make them for you based on your measurements. And then there were a couple of 3D printing companies that were just starting to kind of get off the ground doing some 3D printed models as well. And that was like the state of the ecosystem when I started. And each of those had advantages and disadvantages. Certain ones of those cages might be relatively comfortable. Certain ones might be relatively easy to keep clean. Certain ones might be lightweight, but there weren't any that combined all of those things into one package. And you really need all of those in order for a cage to actually work well, especially if you're hoping to wear it in any kind of more long-term way and do that comfortably and safely. And that's where that's what my goal was and my kind of vision was when I was designing the Cobra, which is the line of cages that we sort of became famous for, was to make something that was going to be really comfortable, really lightweight, really smooth. So there's no like sharp edges or seams or any, roughness or anything like that. And that would come in enough sizes that no matter what your anatomy is, you could find something that was going to be comfortable for you. Because as I've learned in the course of running this business, there is just so much variation in human anatomy out there, like way more than I understood when I started doing this. And so if you've only got, 2 or 3 or 4 cage sizes, you're probably not going to have enough to actually work well for most people. And I'm really proud that that's something that we have focused on over the years. And at this point, we actually have our core lineup of cages. We actually have 40 that we offer, which are all pre-made in inventory. So we have like a warehouse where we keep these. And it's very expensive and very labor intensive for us to do this, but we feel really powerfully that you need to have these so that you can satisfy not necessarily every person, but the vast majority of people who are out there. And when you combine that with the number of rings that we offer, that actually it multiplies out to 960 size combinations that we have in our kind of off-the-shelf lineup, with more that you can do if you sort of special order things. So we cover just about all the anatomies out there. In terms of the question of like how the market has really changed, the other big thing you see is just the sheer number of options has just exploded. So like I said, when I started, there were maybe 10 or 12 out there. And now if you go on Amazon alone, you'll probably see 1,000 different listings for chastity cages. It's just wild and I think that speaks to how much this has really taken off as a kink or a fetish or just a sexual practice or whatever you want to call that. Chastity has really exploded in popularity. And a lot of those are not very good, let's say. There's a huge explosion of these really kind of cheap products, mostly manufactured in China. Often they're quite low quality. A lot of them are actually like counterfeits or knockoffs of, there's a ton of knockoffs of our products. There's also knockoffs of other premium brands that make chastity cages. So there's like this huge explosion in the market, and which is cool to see, but also a little bit frustrating when you're dealing with trying to kind of clamp down on the knockoffs.
Yeah, and so for those folks who haven't tried chastity yet, you were talking about the ring versus the other part. Can you talk about how those parts kind of come together, just for somebody who's maybe never done it before, and the importance of kind of the size of the ring being right?
Yeah, absolutely. So for most cages out there, which are usually referred to as like trapped ball style chastity cages, that's the kind of main category that we're talking about here. That's what mine are, and a lot of the other market leaders. There's basically two main pieces. There's the cage piece that goes over the penis, and then there's the ring piece that you mentioned that goes behind the whole package. So it goes, you take your penis and the balls, you take the whole package, you put it through the ring, then you attach on the cage piece, and then you connect them together with a lock of some kind, whether it's a little internal lock or a padlock or whatever it is. And so the ring really does need to be fitted correctly for you in order for it to be comfortable. If it's too tight, you're going to get rubbing, you're going to get aching, especially when you start to get erections, and particularly at night with nighttime erections, it is going to be really uncomfortable. It could be dangerous if it's too tight. And then if it's too big, if it's too loose, you get the opposite issue where it's just going to kind of fall down off your body. It's not going to stay on you. It's not going to feel snug, and it's not going to do the job of a chastity cage, right? Which is to stay in place and keep things secure.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Do you think you could kind of walk us through a little bit, like the design and manufacturing process and how you manage to balance security and comfort and also aesthetics with your cages?
Sure, absolutely. So with manufacturing, we do all of our production in the U.S. We work with a cutting-edge engineering company to do the manufacturing. It's a powder-based nylon 3D printing. So this is quite different from, if you have any, if you guys yourselves or you have any listeners who are familiar with 3D printing, most people have this idea of what's called filament, right? It's like a spool of plastic that comes out of a little nozzle, and that is not what we use for our manufacturing. We use enterprise grade, really industrial 3D printers that fuse nylon powder with heat. And doing this allows us to make 3D printed products that have the strength and the non-porosity and the durability and the smoothness of like an injection molded plastic. So it's actually like a really cutting edge technology. And then we follow up the production with an industry leading kind of vapor smoothing. So it actually takes all of the cages and it uses a vaporized solvent to basically seal the outer layer of the parts, which makes them super smooth, and it has this really nice kind of satiny finish to them.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So, for somebody like me who was a little bit afraid at first, if you're talking to somebody and you were to give them one piece of advice for somebody who's new and considering chastity, what would that what would that piece of advice look like to them as they're thinking about, is this right for me?
So I'll give you a flippant answer, and then I'll give you like a real answer. The flippant answer is that I think for a lot of people who are nervous about chastity, you shouldn't be nervous that it's going to go wrong or that you're going to hate it. You should be nervous that you might like it a little bit too much, because what we find is that chastity is a very addictive kink, and people who try it very quickly they decide not only that they like it, but they almost don't want the cage to come off, and they get sad when it comes off. So you better kind of watch out for what you wish for. So that's the flippant answer. But the real answer is no. People are nervous, and I think for legitimate reasons, and maybe I can help with that a little bit in answering those. So I think there's a couple of almost like myths or misconceptions that people have that make them nervous. And so for guys, one of them that's floating around online that you see all the time online is that if you wear a cage, especially if you wear one a lot, that it's going to make your dick shrink. You guys have probably seen this online. We see this all the time. People ask us this, and the answer is just no. That is not medically correct. It's not going to happen. Now, some people fantasize about it. Some people actually almost wish that it would happen. If you get into small penis humiliation, or you really like that, almost like a contrast between yourself and a bull, that might be like a turn on. But whether you want it to happen or whether you're scared of that happening, either way, the answer is that's wrong. That's a myth. That's not going to happen. And the second myth that I'll address is I think some people have this idea, like you said, that it's going to hurt, that it's going to be painful or it's going to injure you. And the answer there is, in the sort of dark ages of chastity, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, it's probably true that, like, I had that experience, that a lot of people who tried cages would find that they'd get cut or they'd get pinched or they'd get squeezed in a way that really was not good. Cage design has come a long way, and I'm really proud of the work that I've done on that. And there's some other good companies too, of course. As long as you get one that fits you well, and that's a key consideration, right? Is making sure that you put in the effort to get one that's actually a good fit for your anatomy, that's not too big, that's not too small. Some people think that they ought to get a big cage as a beginner because they'll have like room to grow, right? And we find that that's a common mistake that people make, but it's not a good idea. It's going to be really bulky under your pants. It's going to be hard to pee well, and it's just not going to be very comfortable. And then other people try to get a super, super tiny, small one and cram themselves into this tiny cage because that's like part of their kind of hot fantasy, right? That they want to be as small as possible. And I would also say, that's not a good idea either. If you're really cramming yourself into something that's way too small for what God gave you, that's not going to be comfortable, and that might lead to some comfort or even safety issues as well. So, be realistic and buy something that's actually a good fit for your anatomy.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Good
Good
advice.
advice. So for couples who are just dipping their toes into chastity, what do you think is a good like starter timeline before moving into more longer term lockups?
I would say, as far as timeline, I think it varies from couple to couple. Some people might find that they put a cage on and then it just doesn't come up for a while, right? We've heard of people who their first time they ever did chastity was Locktober, and they put it on October 1st, and it didn't come off till October 30th, 31st, 30th or 31st. Sorry, um, yeah. That is, for most people, that's probably a bad idea. We recommend, starting small, try it out, especially because you might not be sure if you got one that fits correctly. So try it, make sure the fit is right, make sure that the ring is right. You might need to take it off and make adjustments and get a slightly different one in order for it to be suitable for long-term wear. So it really does vary from person to person. I don't think there's anything that inherently means that first you have to do it for an hour and then you have to do it for 3 hours, and there's a certain system before you can wear it long term. I do think that there are some sort of mistakes that people make when they're first putting on cages, and that's maybe something that we can talk about a little bit. One, obviously trying the wrong size. We spoke about that. I think another one is some people will kind of try to push through pain, especially in the nighttime. They'll feel like they're so turned on by the experience, or that it's like part of the true chastity experience to suffer in their cage. And I really want to encourage your listeners that I don't think that that's a good idea. If you're having either pain or just if you're having trouble sleeping, right?
And I think that's really great advice for men out there. And so, guys, if you're a cuck who's in chastity, there's been times at night where it's hurt and I'll roll over and I'll ask Lexie. Because one thing I don't like to do is remove the device without asking your permission.
Darn right.
And so, like, I've literally woken you up, honey, like I'm hurting. Do you mind if I take this off? And you're always like cool with it. You've never been like, no.
Yeah.
Because if I am doing that, it's for safety. So guys,
Yeah.
there's like that's where the game still is in play, right? As I'm asking my wife's permission to remove it, but she knows I'm asking to remove it because I'm either in pain, I can't sleep, something is going on. So don't take the game so far that your real life is suffering. Katie, how have you seen chastity strengthen relationships? Have you seen that where communication and all that gets better because of chastity?
We've absolutely seen that. I think that's a really fascinating question. So I'll answer both halves of that. So in terms of strengthening relationships, I think one of the coolest examples of this is actually a couple that I was speaking to quite recently. And their specific situation is they were a married couple, husband and wife, and they had always had a mismatched libido. So the husband wanted to have sex all the time. The wife had a lower libido, and the husband also suffered from premature ejaculation, which made sex frustrating and difficult, and kind of wasn't working well for either of them. And they would always get into fights about this, and it was really causing a lot of stress in their marriage. And then they tried chastity as not actually for like a kink reason, but almost more for a practical reason. They said, hey, he's going to try wearing the cage. We're going to see if that helps to take some of the pressure off and have him have the decision be hers about when they were going to be able to have sex, to turn that control and that power over to her and take the pressure off so that they wouldn't kind of fight as much about their mismatched libido. And they found that this was an incredibly powerful and successful way of doing that. And it actually unlocked like a kinky side in both of them that they both started to really enjoy as a result of this. But it actually solved this pretty serious issue in their relationship that was kind of tearing them apart. And then it brought them together in this really powerful way. And I thought that was a really cool example of it. When it comes to communication and consent, I mean, yeah, it's super important. I think, hopefully, as your listeners know, really for any kind of, kink or BDSM or power exchange in relationships, communication and consent are like the bedrock of what that's founded on. And you really want to be doing a lot of that. I think that chastity is just like that, but with sort of a couple of extra ways. One is that the cage is going to be literally locked on his body. And so you really do want to have good communication because let's say there's some emergency that comes up during the day, right? Where it could be a medical thing, could be like, hey, just a ball got twisted or something. And, you need to kind of unlock it to resolve that situation. Sometimes guys will have an emergency key on them, and we typically recommend, especially if you're new to chastity and you're just getting into it, that's like a good safety measure to have. Just have the guy keep one on him. You can lock it in a little key sleeve or put it in a block of ice or do what you have to do, or just use the honor system. But it's a good idea until you're really sure you know what you're doing. Longer term, maybe you won't have that and your key holder really is holding that key for you. And it does become extra important that the two of you have good lines of communication open so that you can solve that, any kind of situations that come up. I think the other key thing, which really gets into like the psychology dimension, is that, chastity almost can have like it has a dynamic that's a little bit similar to CNC, right? Like consensual non-consent, because I think a lot of the time for the man, the fantasy is he's locked up and he's loving it, right? He's loving being teased. He's loving being denied. And so he might be begging, hey, please, I really want to come, or like, what can I do to be allowed to get out or to be allowed to have an orgasm? And as the woman or as the key holder, you want to have enough understanding of what his headspace is to understand if he really means it or if that's like part of the game, right? But actually, maybe the last thing he wants is to be let out, right? Maybe he's loving it so much. He's loving being teased. He's loving being denied. So you've got to have those lines of communication and like a really deep understanding of who your partner is in order to be able to read between the lines of what he's saying. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. And I actually want to turn to and ask Lexie, like, how do you do that? Because I feel like you do a good job of knowing when I'm serious and when, like, how do you
It's
do?
hard to describe. I mean, it's micro mannerisms that you have that kind of let me know, and they're hard to describe, but like I know when the right time to say, okay, you can, come out of your cage, we'll have some fun, and other times that I'm like, no, you can stay in there, have fun.
Yeah, you're really good at it. And she nails it. And by the way, if she doesn't nail it, if like I'm really, really, really serious, I'm gonna die, like I'm having like serious blue balls, like it's been like 2 weeks, like I will just ask her. Like that's when you have to almost pause the dynamic and
Yeah.
be like, hey babe, kind of serious here. Like I kind of need a release. So I think that's where communication, like it gets really good and you learn how to pause the game when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
And you might
Absolutely.
also want to have a safe word, right? Like what you just said there about pausing the game. In classic kind of BDSM dynamics, that's where, maybe if he says pineapple, that maybe that's a bad one for
Yeah.
the cuckolding
Yeah.
world. But if he says guava, then it means we gotta like hit pause and talk about it, right? But a safe word could be a smart thing to consider.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the biggest mental and also emotional benefits that you've seen people report from having extended chastity? And were there any surprising psychological effects that you heard about from your customers?
This is a great question. There are really so many. So the most obvious one I think is just an increase in erotic energy, right? Like libido. So this is sort of the go-to effect that caging has, especially, if you're not having an orgasm as a man for a day or a few days or a week or even longer, your horniness is just going to go through the roof, right? And this is something that people love, and this is why chastity becomes so addictive as a kink, is that kind of buzzing, heightened state of erotic intensity is just such a fun place to be. I think going along with that is sexual adventurousness, right? So when you're in that elevated, adventurous, horny state, a lot of people, particularly if they're more on the sub side or the bottom side, they may find themselves starting to want to do things that otherwise they might have been a little scared to do or a little bit squicked out to do. So people will often become more masochistic. People will often get off more on humiliation. I think if you have a bull in the dynamic and you've ever wanted to experiment with like a forced buy dynamic or cleanup or anything like that, then being really, really, really horny and denied and turned on is an awesome headspace to do those things where you might have been like a little bit nervous or a little bit squicked out to do them before, but then you're just so horny and you're so eager to please your partner that you suddenly find yourself really eager to try those things.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because I think that some guys are scared to try chastity because they think that that's basically putting their libido on hold and turning off the sex thoughts, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
That's
Yeah,
exactly right. And
I hear a lot of guys say that it like focuses them, and so then they're more of the helper in the situation, and I think it does both. Like it does, when you're kicked, because we've had experiences where I've been in chastity and she's been with a bull, like in the same room. It does focus you in terms of like you're not going to participate, so you're good at being a helper, but it's still like the level of intense turn on when you're denied. It's hard to explain how hot it is. But how do you recommend? Because I know one thing, like especially with long-term caging, like some people stay in a cage for weeks and weeks, ho- and they almost feel bad taking it off for anything. But hygiene is real. Like,
Yeah,
so what do you
kind of
recommend?
important.
Yeah, what do you recommend on that, KD? How often do they take it off? How do they handle hygiene, especially with your cages?
that's a really important question. So, firstly, the choice of the cage that you're wearing is going to make a big difference, right? So, the cages vary a lot. There are some that are going to totally enclose the penis. There's going to be no exposed skin at all. And then there's other ones that have a lot of open area. And it's not really that one is better or worse. They have different trade-offs. And some people like the more tactile experience that you can touch between the bars and get stimulated. Other people like ones where there's sensory denial and you can't feel anything or see anything, any of the skin of your penis. Obviously, the ones that are more open are easier to keep clean. So if that's really important to you, then maybe choosing one that has thinner bars, more space between the bars is going to be a good idea. In those cases, usually you can do a pretty good job of cleaning. Like with our Cobra cages, which are the more open of the cage lines that we offer, you can just go in the shower, really lather up with a lot of soap and get it kind of between the bars, and people can keep the cage on for quite a long time just by cleaning that way. And every time you pee, use a little bit of toilet paper to try to dab and clean things that way after you use the bathroom. We do tend to recommend that people take it off every once in a while, let's say once a week, but it could really vary from person to person. Maybe it has to be more or maybe less than that to do more of like a deep cleaning where you kind of scrub out the inside of the cage. You use some good soap. You clean yourself also. You kind of deep clean yourself and then once that's cleaned and then dried, drying is really important as well to make sure things don't grow. Then then put the cage back on. So I think that common sense is really important here. If you notice a smell that's kind of getting more and more significant over time, that's probably a good time to reevaluate the hygiene routine that you've got going and maybe start cleaning more often. It might depend whether you have foreskin or not. Some of our customers have mentioned that guys who are cut have a little bit of an easier time with hygiene in a chastity cage than guys who are uncut. So a lot is really going to depend on your individual situation. And I think using common sense, using good judgment, and remembering, I do think one last point to make on this is remembering that when your cage comes off, it might be in the context of a scene, or it might be after a long period of denial, and you might be so horny to play with your partner, but that might be a good moment to take a few seconds, go to the bathroom, go and clean, because if you're going to go and do something sexual with your partner, it's probably going to go better and just be a better experience for everyone if you clean off. So keep that in mind. You might not have the presence of mind in the moment if you haven't prepared for that. So think about that in advance.
Amen.
Great advice. Really good. I'm learning so much here.
So you've been thinking about it. But turning fantasy into reality takes more than curiosity. It takes direction. I work with couples and individuals to guide you through the conversations and dynamics that make a cuckolding relationship actually work. Those first conversations and introductions to your fantasy are especially critical. Done right, it changes everything. Done wrong, it can break it. If you're ready to do it the right way, book time with me at cuckoldjustlexie.com.
Well, I mean, you do a great job of that, and I mean, I make you clean it every day
Yeah.
without fail.
Yes.
So, yeah, but great advice.
That's good. And
Um,
well, and I love how you said that you make him do it, right? Because I think that that can actually be really smart because if you add a ritualized, it's almost like an order that you're giving him, right? Then it's fun, right? Then cleaning doesn't feel like it's cheating and it doesn't feel like it's taking away from the chastity experience. It's actually adding to the experience that he's under your control, right? He's doing what you're telling him to do. So I love that. I actually think that's really smart.
exactly. That's how I see it. Yeah. Um, so in your experience, how does chastity kind of intersect with other kinks like teasing and denial and orgasm control? And also, are there any combinations of those things that tend to work really well for couples?
It intersects so well with absolutely every one of those, right? I mean, chastity cages are like the toy out of anything you might put in your toolkit to enhance the experience of teasing and denial and orgasm control. I view chastity as like a catalyst for other kinks. It raises that horniness and it makes everything else more sensitive and kind of more fun in some ways. For teasing, there's a lot of obvious things you can do. I think that one of the iconic things is to have the woman wear the key, the cuckold dress, wear the key to the chastity cage around her neck or somewhere else on her body. Then, whether you're out at dinner or you're home on the couch watching a movie or whatever it is, he's always seeing it and being aware of it. And it's kind of just out of reach in this very sort of fun, symbolic, tantalizing way. You can obviously add elements of pleasure and service to the lockup experience, where he has to kind of pleasure you, whether it's orally or other ways, and that's going to be super teasing for him, right? Because he's going to be so close to you and so close to a kind of intimate, the most intimate parts of your body, but then not able to touch himself and not able to get off himself, and that's like a really really fun way that guys often love to be teased. That can be great for both partners. You can just kind of casually press yourself up against his cage or kind of grind on his cage a little bit throughout the day when you're standing together, and that can feel really good. I think even without doing any special teasing, just having the cage on him is a tease in and of itself, right? It's like a naughty secret. So when he's walking around, he could be at the grocery store, he could be at work, and just feeling that slight kind of compression on his body and remembering, oh, she's got me locked in this, it's just going to put you as the key holder in his mind all the time throughout the day.
The return on investment in terms of the amount of play you get out of this one device is so worth it. Especially if you are a cuckoldress and you're running out of ideas or you just get tired of having to, because we're needy as cucks, right?
Yes,
Kind of,
you are.
but I mean, one way to just always have the game on without having to do a lot of work is just getting a chastity cage. I mean, it does the work for you. Like it, and so the guy in our mind, I'll tell you, you're probably going about your day, honey. And in my mind, I'm still like I can feel the chastity cage. So I know what's going on. I'm still turned on. You're going on with your day. You don't have to do anything at that moment in time. So I just think in terms of the ROI on all the toys you can get, it's the one that has, it's not like a toy that you play with like for 20 minutes and then you put it away, right? This can lead to days and days or months of enjoyment.
Great.
Um, so one of the things that I love the most is when Lexie is out dating or playing and she leaves me in chastity. This was a game changer. So what do you recommend in terms of design or styles that within your product line, or any features that are specific for this kind of lifestyle within the cuckolding lifestyle? If let's say Lexi or a wife is out on a date for a night or something like that, is there a specific one you recommend? Any of your products you recommend in general for that kind of play? Because that's kind of one of my favorite things.
Well, Let me talk for a moment about the psychology of that, because that reminds me of it, and then we can talk about the devices. On
Yeah.
the psychology side, I think you allude to something that's really powerful, which is that by being locked up like that, it's like the perfect way to enhance the cuckolding experience of having your partner be out on a date with a bull, right? Because and the key thing about that is that if you accidentally come and you lose that energy and you lose that erotic heightened state, you kind of, as a man, you can get like a hormonal crash, right? And it can really be kind of bad. And it can make you suddenly think, oh God, what am I doing? Why am I letting her do this? It's that post nut clarity, right? But if you stay in that elevated state, it's like the best way, whether you're there with the your cuckoldress and the bull and all three of you together and you're watching what they're doing, or whether you're just at home and they're out on their date having a great time. It puts you into a much better headspace as a cuck to really enjoy that experience. So yeah, I don't know if you agree with that from your own experience, but that is my sense
Could
from
not agree
talking to
more.
people. Yeah.
100% agree.
We've had that happen. And
The post-nut clarity?
the first time I was away for an overnight,
Oh, yeah, that was bad.
yeah, that was before we got the cage. And so, yeah, we fixed that problem.
Yeah, it just says it, and it's really nice too because if she's out playing, she's out having a good time, and I'm home by myself, it makes me feel like I'm participating in some way. When I am in chastity, and then she'll normally, like one time she sent me a text that says, "I'm out having a ball while you're at home locked up." Like, and that was it. That was the end of the text, and there was like a picture of her dancing or something like that. And it's those little things that she does that I think that hot wives or cuckoldresses can learn from that are just that probably took you 10 seconds to write that text and it gave me hours of enjoyment. So I mean it's those little things that you do. But yeah, get Katie back over to you.
Yeah. So to answer the first part of your question, which was around more the mechanical side of like what devices or what cages would be good for that kind of experience, I think that anything that's comfortable and is going to fit you well is really going to work. I don't know that there's exactly one over another. Obviously, I love when people use our products. I think the important thing is kind of inherent in that scenario that you described is that she's not going to be there, right? And so if your partner, especially if they're the key holder and they've got your key, if they're not going to be around, that's where it's extra important to make sure that it's something that's safe and comfortable and fits you well, and where you're confident that you can wear it for the duration of that whole experience, whether it's a couple hours or it might be overnight or longer, that you can wear it for that period of time and it's not going to cause any problems for your body. So, the more that you're using this and the longer durations that you're wearing it for, the more it becomes important to make sure that you've dialed in your fit, your size, and that you've invested in a device that works really well for you.
So let's get a little bit spicy. What are some creative ways for wives or key holders to use the cage or the key? I mean, you already mentioned the key, but maybe use the cage to tease or humiliate or even reward their locked up husbands in a cuckold context.
There are so many ways, and the internet is full of inspiration on this. Definitely encourage everyone who's listening to go and enjoy your favorite website or your favorite porn and see some ideas. But I can definitely give a few. So one is I've definitely seen really hot clips or photos of basically like penetration, but using the cage, and that's it's really hot to see it, right? Because it's like you're so close, but you're so far. So that's a really fun and kind of humiliating, but really enjoyable kind of tease that I think a lot of people would enjoy if they tried it. You could do something like you can kind of gamify the experience. So chastity is something that lends itself really well to anything kind of quantitative or almost statistical or gamified, right? So you can decide how many days, and you can keep increasing the challenge of the number of days that you're going to keep your cuck locked up. You could also do something like orgasm ratios. I think that's something that people really have fun with. The idea that, okay, I only get to come after she's come every 10 times and then, or every 20 times. And you can play with those numbers. So it really kind of puts a focus on whose pleasure is primary in the relationship, right? And I think both people can have a lot of fun with that. So that could be something for your listeners to try as well, is establishing some sort of gamified protocols like that.
I love the ratio. I love the orgasm ratio. Let's do that. That
Okay.
sounds fun.
You can mark them in a
That
calendar.
yeah, we're gonna put that on our calendar like starting tonight. That sounds amazing. So Katie, looking ahead, where do you see chastity and male denial heading in the kink and cuckold communities? And are there any exciting innovations or cultural shifts on the horizon from your company, from Kink 3D?
In terms of shifts, the biggest thing that I've seen is just increasing awareness and increasing excitement about chastity year over year. So this is something that really has blown up within the past, I would say, 5 years. I don't know if you all saw, but there's a porn website, Clips for Sale, that they do an annual announcement about what people are searching for the most on their platform. And last year, 2025, they actually listed chastity as their kink of the year, their fetish of the year, because people were searching for it so much. Funnily enough, cuckolding was actually their runner-up. So there's
Wow.
clearly, I would say, it's a 1-2 punch of chastity and cuckolding. So both are doing very, very well. We actually run our own survey every year where we ask people about their experience with different cages and with chastity as a whole. And we've been doing this for 3 years now. And the number of responses has been growing hugely year over year. Last year, I think we got maybe about 400 responses. And then this year, it's actually running at the moment, and it's not even done yet. And we've gotten about 3,000 responses so far. And yeah, it really blew me away how much growth we've seen year over year. And of those, it was actually really cool. One of the questions we ask is, what other kinks are you into, or how do you kind of fit chastity into your lifestyle, whatever that is. And about 30% of our respondents mentioned cuckolding. So that was actually one of the top sort of connected kinks that we heard about in the course of that survey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so, I mean, I'm not surprised. It's become so much more mainstream. It's become so much more mainstream, and I think guys and Lexie's talked about the research for more than half of men have some kind of fantasy about sharing their wife. So,
Mm-hmm.
where can our listeners find you, Katie, and order one of your products? And can you talk about kind of the fitting process? Because I know you have a team of people that basically their job is to stare at male anatomy, right?
That's
So
right.
how does this work if somebody wants to get one of your cages?
That's right. We have a very well trained, really expert customer service team with a very odd job description. Right, they're getting dick pics and then carefully analyzing them as part of their job. They love it. So there's a couple of
I get
different
that
ways.
too.
Lexie gets 6 picks, but she often doesn't get paid for the ones that she gets.
So there's a couple different ways. So first, just to let people know about our website, it's kink3d.com. So just kink, then the number 3 and the letter d.com. There are, as I mentioned towards the beginning of the conversation, there are actually a lot of like counterfeits of our cages because they've been so influential. So it is important for people, if you're searching for our main lines of cages, which are called Cobra cages and Viper cages, make sure you go to our actual website and don't get suckered in by some of the counterfeits. You can find us on socials. We are Kink 3D Designs on X, Twitter, also on Instagram. And we actually have our own subreddit, which is our Kink 3D. So that's a whole community of people who are into our products on Reddit. As far as the sizing experience, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can email us, so that's support@kink3d.com, and then that's where our team of experts will help you to evaluate your measurements, photos. If you've tried other chastity products in the past, we can kind of find out more about how those fit you, and we can triangulate all of that evidence and then try to give you the best answer that we can about what we think will work well from our sites. We can't 100% guarantee that we're going to get a hole-in-one on a perfect fit, but we're pretty good at it, and we should be able to get you pretty close. So that's one way. And then the second way is actually we have invested a lot, and I'm really proud of this. We're the first company that's done this in the chastity cage world. We've invested a lot in offering in-person sizing experiences for our cages. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can come to events so we actually travel all around the world running these events. So an example is the Folsom Street Fair in San Francisco, which is a pretty famous kink event that happens every year in the fall. And there are many events like that that happen all across the U.S. and other countries around the world that we travel to. So you can find those on our website. We have a list of those. And the other way is that we partner with stores. So this is also something where we're the the first chastity cage company to partner with stores to do an in-person sizing program. So you can go to a growing list of stores around the world also in major cities like San Francisco, New York, Chicago, London, Amsterdam, and many more. And you can go in and actually try on our cages in person and find one that's going to fit you well. So those are all really great options for trying to figure out what size is going to work best for you.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
the process is amazing. I definitely, guys, don't wait until September 15th to
Yeah.
prepare for October. And the Blonde by the Bay told me there's a no net November too.
No nut November.
Yeah, I didn't know about that one. But so they're back to back. So guys, let's prepare. All right, so go to Kink 3D today and get your cage and get size and all that stuff so we can be prepared for the big time. Katie, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time today.
We so do.
And
Thank you,
we
guys.
are good. Yeah, we're going to do a listener question. We always have our guests stay. And if you have thoughts on the listener question, we'll have you weigh in too. So this one is from New Albany, Indiana. So the question is, hi there, guys. Greetings from Indiana. Love the podcast and hearing from the husband and wife. My question is for first timers. What do you think about the wife playing with a coworker? Everyone's opinion is probably differs, but do you think that you should keep business and pleasure separate, or is it more acceptable for you all? Keep in mind, this would be the first time ever exploring outside of the relationship. So, Lexie, why don't you go first? What are your thoughts on playing with a coworker?
I think it's a terrible idea. I'm not gonna lie, I always speak my mind, and I think that it's risky because if things go well, then it might still create awkwardness at the workplace that you really don't want. But heaven forbid things don't go well at any point, whether it's right away or, a year down the road, what have you. You now have to every day go to work dreading seeing that person. And heaven forbid, what if it turns nasty and just I think that it's risky. Anytime that you mix business and pleasure, it's a risk that generally I always try to not just steer clear from, but run a million miles per hour in the opposite direction. Um, that's just my opinion.
I differ a little bit on it. So actually, I differ completely. So well, I agree with you.
Why would you admit you're wrong?
I agree with you on the risks.
Just kidding.
There's definitely risks
Yeah.
involved. But if you think about where most people spend most of their time and meet and interact, and you hear about like, oh, this person's my work wife or my work husband or that kind of thing, and there's normally some flirtation that goes along with that. As long as everybody is clear on what the dynamic is and you're not violating HR policies, then I say go for it because it can end badly no matter how you meet somebody. So I mean, there's so many nasty things that can happen no matter how you meet somebody. I would love if you met a coworker and you had like a work husband I think that would be one of my biggest turn-ons because then you would get to see him all the time. But KD, what is your opinion on this one? You're the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be diplomatic and come down somewhere in the middle here. I will say on a sort of a personal level or in terms of our business, we always actually try to have very kind of professional, pretty strict boundaries at our company because we are in such a quirky, already very sort of adult natured business. We sort of feel like we should be extra careful to actually be very professional and have quite strict boundaries in the office because we feel like that sort of counterbalances the risks of having a workplace where, like I said, we're getting dick pics all day from our customers, and we don't want to push that too far. But thinking about the question more theoretically, yeah, I think I take kind of a risk reward sort of approach to these things, and Chris, I definitely see what you're saying. That hey, that's a place where you meet people and spend time in your life, it really cuts down on opportunities to make good connections if you're sort of saying the workplace is off limits. But then, Lexie, I definitely see what you're saying, that the risk is so high. And for me, I think If you're talking about relationships where you're trying to meet someone in the workplace who's going to become like a long-term partner or a wife or a husband, then it's like that potential reward is so high that maybe it's worth the risk in some sense. But if you're talking about more something where you really kind of expect from the beginning that it's going to stay on a kind of a casual level, that it's going to be someone you play with a little bit, but it's not really going to get to that next level of like really sort of life-changing intimacy, then that does kind of put a cap on the reward. So then maybe it's not quite worth the risks that Lexie outlined. So I don't want to say for sure what the right answer is there. I can kind of see both sides, but that's where my head's at.
Yeah, I probably think the right answer are you and Lexi with those words of caution. I'm just probably in my cuck brain thinking how hot it would be if Lexi met somebody at work.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I agree completely with KD. Like, it's if there is such a great reward, if you're thinking to yourself, "Oh my gosh, I've met my soulmate," then maybe it's worth it. But if when it is something for um, a kink, a fetish, a friends with benefits, a anything like that, that yeah, to me, it's the risk is not worth the reward.
yeah. All
Uh,
right.
um,
So we're gonna close out now.
Yeah, that's the only question we have for today. Before we go, though, we do have a small favor to ask. If you guys enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to just rate and review the Cuckold Marriage podcast on your favorite podcast app, whichever one you're listening on. Those ratings and those comments really help people to discover the show. They help us out, and we read every single one of them. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. We love your support. We never take it for granted. We are so grateful that you have chosen to be a part of this community. And until next time, remember to be honest with your desires, communicate with your partner, and don't be afraid to explore things that bring you closer together. And if you're missing me already, you know where you guys can find me. Bye, boys.
Bye, everybody.